She thought he was invisible, just another janitor mopping floors beneath her private jet. But in that hangar, under the roar of engines and flashing cameras, everything was about to change. Ava Sterling, a powerful CEO, laughed as she tossed the jet keys at his feet, mocking his place and his skin in front of everyone. What she didn't know was that Jordan had once flown missions that saved lives. Missions she'd only read about in headlines. The man she humiliated wasn't just a janitor. He was the storm she never saw coming. For 3 quiet years, Jordan had worked the night shift at Sterling Aerotech, a billion-dollar aviation firm known for its innovation and exclusivity. Every evening, while the executives left in black cars, he stayed behind to polish the marble floors and empty their trash cans. He moved quietly through the hangar, surrounded by the gleam of private jets he'd never fly and luxury he'd never touch. To most, he was invisible, a shadow with a mop, but Jordan carried a past no one in that building could imagine. Once he'd worn a uniform, piloting aircraft under skies filled with danger. He'd trained soldiers, led rescue missions, and earned medals that now sat untouched in a drawer he could barely open. Those days had ended when he came home to a world that valued his labor but ignored his worth. At Sterling Aerotech, his silence kept him safe. But every shift reminded him of what he'd lost: respect, purpose, and the belief that the color of his skin wouldn't define how high he could rise. Ava Sterling, the company's glamorous and commanding CEO, often stayed late reviewing contracts, her presence impossible to ignore. To her, Jordan was just another name on payroll, someone who cleaned the spaces she conquered. She'd built her empire on control and precision, and humility wasn't part of her vocabulary. But that evening, under the floodlights of the private hangar, their worlds were about to collide. A challenge, born of arrogance and prejudice, would shatter the quiet routine Jordan had carefully built. The woman who saw a janitor was about to discover a man who'd once commanded the skies, and this time, her laughter would echo back at her in ways she could never predict. The night began like any other. The echo of footsteps, the hum of turbines cooling down, and the faint smell of jet fuel mixing with floor polish. Jordan pushed his cart across the hangar floor, careful not to disturb the executives still lingering from a late investor meeting. His routine was simple: clean, leave, repeat. But that night, Ava Sterling didn't leave. She stood near the gleaming silver jet that bore her family's name, surrounded by half a dozen senior staff. Her designer heels clicked against the floor as she delivered instructions with the sharpness of command. Cameras were ready. The company's social media team had come to film a segment showcasing the people who keep Sterling Aerotech running. To everyone's surprise, Ava pointed to Jordan. "Perfect," she said, loud enough for her entourage to hear. "Let's show the world how our janitorial team keeps things spotless, even if they'll never understand what real work looks like." Laughter followed. The camera lights turned toward him. Jordan froze, unsure if he'd heard her right. Then came the moment that would ignite everything. Ava reached into her blazer pocket and dangled the jet keys before him. "Tell you what," she said, smiling for the cameras, "fly this jet and I'll double your salary, maybe even marry you while I'm at it." Her tone dripped with mockery. The hangar filled with laughter as the keys clinked against the floor at his feet. Phones came out. The clicks and flashes felt like bullets. Jordan stood motionless, his mind splitting between rage and restraint. Years of discipline, military, moral, human, battled against the humiliation boiling inside him. He bent down, picked up the keys, and placed them on a nearby table without a word. For a moment, their eyes met, hers filled with amusement, his with something colder, older. She saw a janitor beneath her. He saw a mirror reflecting everything broken in the world she represented. But Ava wasn't finished. She turned back to her audience. "You see," she continued, "people like him can clean the jet, but they'll never sit inside one." The laughter that followed was loud, cruel, and echoing. That night, Jordan went home in silence. The internet was not so quiet. Within hours, clips of the Jet Challenge spread across social media, captioned, "CEO teaches janitor a lesson." Comments poured in, half laughing, half outraged. Some defended her, others condemned the arrogance. But for Jordan, none of that mattered. He stared at his reflection in the darkened window of his small apartment, the same face that once appeared on military IDs and news articles for his rescue missions overseas. The same man who'd flown aircraft into combat zones to save strangers. And now he was a viral meme. But beneath the humiliation, something shifted. His silence was no longer protection. It was a weapon waiting to be used. He began revisiting old files, names, and connections. Ava's jet company wasn't just about luxury. It was built on contracts. Some he recognized from his past work. Something didn't add up. By sunrise, Jordan wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about truth, and the storm that was coming for the woman who thought she'd broken him. The hangar lights blazed brighter than ever that morning. Ava Sterling had gathered her board, investors, and the press to showcase Sterling Aerotech's new private jet, the same one she'd mocked Jordan over. Cameras rolled as she prepared for takeoff, confident and radiant in her tailored pilot suit. The world would see her as untouchable. But Jordan was there too, not as a janitor this time, but as a silent observer, cleaning the runway near the hangar's edge. Nobody noticed him, just as before. Yet his eyes tracked every movement, every pre-flight procedure, and every oversight. Something didn't feel right. As Ava boarded the jet, Jordan spotted a maintenance discrepancy in the fuel system log. The same one he'd quietly tried to report weeks ago, ignored because of his position and his skin. He felt a cold dread rising. One missed detail could turn this demonstration into a tragedy. He sprinted toward the tarmac, waving his arms, shouting over the engines. But to the security guards, it was just the janitor causing a scene. They restrained him roughly, pushing him to the ground as cameras caught the chaos. Reporters whispered, "What's he doing?" while others sneered. Through the roar, Jordan's voice broke through. "Tell her not to take off. The system's compromised." But no one listened. Then, mid-lift, the jet stuttered. A plume of smoke erupted from the left engine. Panic spread across the runway as alarms wailed. The same executives who once laughed now shouted orders. Jordan broke free, running toward the emergency console, entering a sequence known only to trained pilots. The engine stabilized seconds before disaster. The cameras caught everything. The crash that almost happened, the man who stopped it, and the dawning horror on Ava Sterling's face as she realized who he really was. The janitor she mocked had just saved her life. Again. When the smoke cleared, silence swept across the hangar. Reporters who had come to praise a CEO now turned their cameras toward the man on the ground, the janitor who had just prevented a tragedy. Ava Sterling stepped out of the jet trembling, mascara streaked, her arrogance stripped away by the weight of reality. The man she mocked had been the only one who saw the danger, the only one who acted, and the world was watching. Within hours, headlines shifted. The same media that once laughed at a janitor's challenge now told the story of Jordan Parker, a former military pilot turned maintenance worker, a man who had risked his life to save those who humiliated him. The clip of Ava tossing the keys went viral again, but this time side by side with footage of Jordan saving her jet. One showed cruelty. The other showed courage. Ava issued a public apology, but it was too late to erase the truth. She hadn't just mocked a man, she'd exposed the prejudice that still poisons boardrooms, break rooms, and hangars alike. Jordan refused interviews. He returned to work the next week, head held high, because he never needed their validation. His worth had never depended on their recognition, only their willingness to see it. Months later, Sterling Aerotech launched a new training program in his name. opening aviation jobs to underrepresented minorities, a symbolic gesture born from shame and awakening. But Jordan's story became something bigger, a reminder that racism doesn't always wear a uniform or wave a flag. Sometimes it hides behind laughter, behind power, behind polished glass walls, because in a world quick to judge by skin and status, one truth remains: greatness doesn't need a title. It just needs to be seen. How many more Jordans will it take before the world stops underestimating them? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.